Hello, thank you for joining us today for the Key Conversations webinar. My name is Joe Zicki, and I work in the Division of Student Life. And I really appreciate you joining the Key Conversations webinar. Your students will be receiving similar information presented in a variety of different formats over the course of orientation once the school year begins. And so for us, we're going to really talk about four areas that we believe are really important as we think about the student experience. Those 4 points today are values, healthy relationships, consent, holistic well-being, alcohol and other drug values as really foundational um, to key conversations for your students before they arrive to campus, when they get to campus, and really for the first academic year. This presentation will also talk about what we in student life will do and offer in terms of supporting students, what we're going to ask your student to do to learn a little bit more about these topics, and also what you can do as a parent or a family member as you really help your student transition to college. Before we get into those topics, I really would like to introduce you to Student Life at Michigan. Student Life is committed to facilitating student learning and the development of the whole student while cultivating a diverse and inclusive campus community. Through our programs and services, facilities, and partnerships, we provide opportunities for students' transformation and enrich their education. Now, there are a lot of different units that make up student life, and in today's presentation, we're really going to talk about four uh, key offices that work with one another as we relate to these key topics that I've highlighted. As you can see on the screen, those four student life units are the Dean of Students Office, the Office of Student Conflict Resolution, Wolverine Wellness, and the Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center. At orientation, students and parents and families will be hearing about other units across student life, such as Michigan Housing and Counseling and Psychological Services. And as I mentioned before, there are over 20 student life units supporting your students' Michigan experience. The Dean of Students Office really is that central hub for students and for parents and family members. If you remember only one thing from our webinar today, please remember that the Dean of Students Office is available to parents, family members, and students to really navigate the Michigan experience. If you're not sure, your students ever just not sure where to go if there's a question, the Dean of Students Office is really that central place for everyone. And if the Dean of Students Office is not the right office to help directly, they will make sure that that connection is made to the right office. Now, in addition to the Dean of Students Office, the Office of Student Conflict Resolution is really focused on promoting a safe and scholarly community, the really helping students navigate conflict in a peaceful, socially just, and self-reflexive manner. Um, a variety of services and programs are offered through the Office of Student Conflict Resolution to really help your student navigate interacting with new people and learn conflict management skills. Wolverine Wellness serves as a major campus resource around well-being, um, really focusing on nurturing a healthy campus environment and promoting wellness and better equipping students to change the world through a variety of programs and services, really focusing on the 8 dimensions of well-being that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. And the Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center offers prevention education for students, confidential support for survivors, for faculty, staff, and students, and collaborates with others across the university to offer trainings, programs, and community engagement strategies to create a campus free from violence. And as I mentioned, while there are a lot of units in student life, these four work very closely together as we think about those key topics that we mentioned at the start of our webinar. Um, Central to that really relate to the University of Michigan values. The university has high standards for civility, respect, integrity, and responsible behavior. These values inform how we treat one another and expect to be treated while in the Michigan community. All members of our community agree to uphold these values, and each are acknowledged through various processes and offices across campus. Moreover, these values really serve as guideposts for behavioral expectations outlined in the Statement of Student Rights and Responsibilities. Now, we know that students come to campus with their own values and have been informed by lived experiences. And a key component of student success is knowing and living their own values. And of course, the values are at the University of Michigan are community owned. In other words, faculty, staff, and students all have a role to play, not only in upholding these values, but creating these values. And at the center of these values, you'll see expect, respect. And this is a campaign really designed to promote those Michigan values. Now, I mentioned the Dean of Students office earlier because, again, if for whatever reason your student does not feel as though this experience is consistent with their values, the Dean of Students office is really there and available to help students navigate that and seek support when they do feel like there's a challenge with these values. But overall, the community is well versed in these values, and we expect everyone to uphold these values as a member of the community. So the first question I would ask you to think about today when we think about the whole student is really as follows. Which of the following contributes most to student success? Being involved on campus, remaining connected to friends and family, knowing campus resources, utilizing effective study habits, or engaging in well-being practices. Now, in reality, every one of these are correct answers. All of them contribute to the whole student's success at the institution. We have decades of research that shows that there are key components that make up a successful student, and those are on your screen. Along with living into and exploring values, it's really important that students think about ahead of time how to engage everything that the campus has to offer. We know that students who are not just going to class, but are also involved in student organizations or maybe work on campus or maybe are a part of a research project tend to do better academically and feel more connected to the campus. And so being involved on campus is really critical to a student's experience, not just at Michigan, but in college in general. Now, while students will be coming to the University of Michigan, they're going to still want to stay connected to friends and family back home, wherever home is. And so it will be important to stay connected and check in, and if possible, to visit and have students visit. They will want to come home for sure. Knowing campus resources, excuse me, is incredibly important because Michigan can feel like a really big place. And if you're not familiar with resources or know that you can seek help to obtain those resources, the first year can be more challenging. And again, this goes back to needing to really help us, help students get connected to those services. And so I'll reiterate the most important thing you can remember from this presentation is to contact the Dean of Students office if you're ever not sure on where to go. And this is one of those examples. If you're just not sure about a resource or if the campus offers a particular service, the Dean of Students office can help navigate that and answer that question. Now, utilizing effective study habits is also critically important to the student success at Michigan. And the thing to remember here is what worked for students prior to Michigan may not work in the campus community. What worked getting to Michigan may not work staying at Michigan, and that's okay. That's part of the first year experience for students at Michigan. Learning new effective study habits may need to be part of that process. It's completely normal and should be expected. And then last and not least is engaging in well-being practices. We are really focused on making sure that the 8 dimensions of well-being are something that all students are aware of, thinking about, and know that the campus is supporting. And so really thinking about well-being is not just about physical fitness, but it's also about nutrition. It's about staying connected. It's making sure that there's resilience in conflict management, that there's a connection to back home, et cetera. All of these things make up a positive experience for students. And as we talk further today, really I want to highlight first and foremost the spectrum of student experience. There are a variety of students on campus, some with limited experience in a variety of areas around coming to college, and some have high levels of exposure experience. Perhaps they had an older sibling or other family member in their life attend college and they're more familiar, or somewhere in the middle. That's okay. There's no right or wrong place to find yourself on this spectrum. And we have services and folks on campus prepared to really help students regardless of where they find themselves on this spectrum. So I mentioned the model of well-being a few times, and as you can see on your screen, there are 8 dimensions of well-being. Our work in student life is to attend to all aspects of college that impact students outside of the classroom. And this model of well-being really represents all those dimensions that make us us. And what we know to be true is that when one of these areas has an imbalance, students tend to try to fill the void quickly, and can make choices that are inconsistent with their values when that happens. And so we really want to explore all the different dimensions of well-being with your student, and also highlight areas to really promote navigating those high highs and low lows in a successful way. I won't go through each one of these dimensions, but really our goal in highlighting these dimensions now and also with your student when they arrive on campus is really to promote resilience and self-awareness across these 8 dimensions. What is somewhat unique to Michigan is indicators of success don't necessarily indicate that a student's well-being is really in a good place. What I mean by that is that um, if a student is getting good grades, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going well for a student around their entire experience. And so we are always going to be tending to all of these 8 dimensions of well-being, because we know, again, with coping mechanisms, there are times in which students try to cope in an unhealthy way or a way that is inconsistent with values. And so we really want to be here to help support students navigate those experiences, and help them live their values that are important to them. One of the other key conversations that's really important to talk about is healthy relationships. And so if you think about for a moment, which of the following characteristics is most important in a healthy relationship? Honesty, respect, open communication, trust, or shared values? Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, they're all important. And if you were saying that, you are correct. All of these are critically important to a healthy relationship. And there are many meanings of the term healthy relationship that apply here. And so we're thinking about friendships, we're thinking about roommate relations, relationships with faculty or graduate instructors, thinking about relationships back home, and maybe intimate partner relationships as well. In regards to these characteristics, regardless of the type of relationship we're thinking about, all of these are really important. Um, so when what we're talking about healthy relationships with students, we're recognizing that really values are critical, and so you know your students better than anyone, and so what we recommend, and what we're going to help students explore is really having students talk about their values, think about their values when it relates to relationships with other people. And this is an area, if you're looking for ways to have conversations with your student, again, before they arrive at Michigan, while they're here, and beyond, it really is to encourage students to make decisions based on their own personal values and create opportunities for students really to share their perspectives and experiences as they're meeting new people at Michigan for the first time, perhaps. And this is something that we know is really important to do, not just at the beginning of the academic year, but consistently throughout the academic year. We know that there are different periods of highs and lows with relationships throughout the academic year based on high stress points, for example, in the semester, thinking about midterms, thinking about end of semester finals or break periods. Those are all opportunities where conflict may arise. And so it's really important that we stay connected with our students and explore those healthy relationships. And the other thing we know that if students think about their values and what's important to them in relationships with other people, they're more likely to stick to those values as opposed to deviating from those values if they don't think about this ahead of time. So another question for consideration relates to consent. And so true or false, most incoming first year students at the University of Michigan know how to get consent for sexual activity. True or false? Now, this, unlike the other questions I've asked, has a correct answer, and the answer actually is false. Various data shows that incoming first-year students have knowledge about consent and can define it, but actually have difficulty in obtaining consent. While it's promising that so many students bring a solid understanding of what consent means and what the definition of consent is, we know not just at Michigan, but at colleges and universities across the country, that there's still a need for skill building for first year students. And so what we know also is many students have absorbed the knowledge about the legal standard of affirmative consent, but this knowledge may not actually indicate behavior. Words may suggest a kind of cognitive dissonance as they describe their own sexual practices. And again, this is an area that we know from research that is something that we need to focus on with students early on in their experience at Michigan and throughout their experience at Michigan. So there are some important life skills that are practical to many situations in life related to healthy relationships and consent. And so, of course, we are certainly thinking about consent with intimate partner relationships, but really, when we think about consent, we're talking about all different types of relationships with a variety of folks in a student's life. And so there are three important factors of consent that, again, we really emphasize with students, not just at the beginning of the time at Michigan, but throughout their experience. And those three factors are as follows. Consent is clear, unambiguous. Consent is enthusiastic, and consent is an ongoing process. Um, Sexual activity must also include consent from everyone involved. We also know that alcohol and other drug use may impair on a person's ability to give or obtain consent. Now, we are also um, talking about consent today in the context of healthy relationships and alcohol. And the consent conversation, as I mentioned before, is applicable to any type of relationship. And we consider it an important life skill, not just while they're at Michigan, but beyond. Now, to help with this consent education, we have developed an online course that every first year student must complete. And that course really emphasizes the understanding of personal values, bystander intervention, and how to obtain consent. There will be additional programming that will be in person, and your student will receive more information about those required courses in their University of Michigan email. So this is a great opportunity to help us and help your students by reminding them that they need to be checking their University of Michigan email on a regular basis, particularly as we get closer to the start of the academic year, because there will be several required online tutorials to complete prior to arriving on campus. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. Another question is around alcohol and other drugs on campus. So please think about the following. Which of the following best describes how you view alcohol use by first year students? It's illegal and they should not do it. Many college students drink. It's part of college. Let them have some fun. A young adult brain is still developing, so I believe alcohol use should be prevented. I do not mind as long as they get good grades. Or students feel social pressure to drink and unsure on how to say no. Now, with respect to these different answers, we can talk through them here. With respect to option A, certainly we do acknowledge at the University of Michigan that alcohol use is prohibited for persons under the age of 21, and that and we also observe all the drug laws that are enforced on campus and in the community. Um, for those that have indicated or are thinking, answer B makes the most sense. Um, some people do think that it is part of college, and for some students, it is. And we are there to support those individuals. There are students who don't want alcohol to be part of their college experience, and we are there for those individuals as well. There are so many things to do on and off campus that do not involve alcohol, and so there are a lot of ways to get involved with substance-free events. If your student ever tells you, there's just nothing to do except drink on the weekends, you now can remember the webinar point telling you that that's just not the case. There are so many activities throughout the week and weekend, all year round for students to get involved with, where alcohol just isn't part of the equation. Now, a young adult brain is still developing, so you believe alcohol use should be prevented. It's totally a valid concern, and it's based on research. We know the impact of alcohol use on a young adult brain. I don't mind as long as they get good grades. As I mentioned earlier in our talk today, um, Michigan students might perform incredibly well academically and be alcohol dependent at the same time. We know that students are highly capable from an academic standpoint. It's part of how they were able to get to the University of Michigan in the first place. And so uh, what sets Michigan apart from many other schools is usually there is a correlation between alcohol use and academic performance. We don't find that to be the case here. Students can do very well academically and have a really unhealthy relationship to alcohol. In E, students feel social pressure to drink and unsure on how to say no. We do hear that from students, and we're here to support those students. We have a variety of services and staff members and health educators that students can meet with, where we can brainstorm how students can go to engagements where there might be alcohol present, but also have the skills and ideas or approaches to not drink and feel included in those environments. And so we're here for your students, regardless of how they would answer this question. The other components I'd highlight around alcohol and other drug use is that we know that risky other alcohol and other drug use are top public health issues across the country in higher education, particularly for first year students. Some of the effects we know about alcohol or drug use is that it can really disrupt sleep, mood, relationships, in addition to the brain development in young adults. And again, similar to that spectrum we talked about later or earlier rather, we have a variety of services and support for students regardless of their exposure to alcohol or other drugs. We're here for students that have never consumed alcohol and do not wish to. We may have students who are experimenting and we're here for them. We also have students who are in recovery, and we have a robust collegiate recovery program as well. And so regardless of where your students may fall on that spectrum, we're here, and we want to make sure that they are making values-based decisions. We know that there is a tension that's created between social pressure to drink or use marijuana and the decision related to the student's own values on deciding to use those substances. How can a student get clear on their values first so they aren't in a position of getting swept away in the moment? Is something that we can focus on before students arrive at Michigan, right when they arrive, and then throughout the year. And this is another area that parents and family members can be incredibly impactful and informative, which takes us to really the influence of family members. I really want to highlight that there is strong correlation between harm reduction and parent and family engagement with their students, particularly around expectations around substance use. We really rely on parents and family members to be part of continuing the positive experiences you have provided for your students throughout their whole lives up to this point. We know that won't stop once they arrive at Michigan. And parent-based interventions like the parent-family communication program really allow parents and family members to interact with the university when there are concerning behaviors related to substance use so that we can all come together to support students and their success based on their values. Um, and being very specific with your student is vital. So this is a time to be very clear with your student around expectations in terms of using alcohol or other drugs. How much are they can they drink? That is something to be very specific about. There are many stories I can think about meeting with students who have been documented for an alcohol incident and exploring what parents or family members have told their students about the expectations. Um, and a lot of times, parents or students would say, "Well, my parents told me, to be smart about it, or make good decisions." And when I ask what that means, a very common answer is not get caught. And so I highlight that example to say if a parent is very or family member is very clear with a student around 1 to 2 drinks only, or thinking about how much time you should space between consuming drinks, or thinking about the importance of eating food before drinking. All of those things with specificity can help a student in the moment make the best decisions for them. And also, if your expectation as a parent or a family member is not to drink at all, it's important to say that too. So we've talked about these key conversation areas, and now I'd like to talk about what we in student life are going to do to help your student with their first year experience. With more than 47,000 students on campus, Michigan can feel like an intimidating place. And so we're really here to create communities to make Michigan feel more personalized and connected and close. Now, one of the things we're going to ask your students to do, as I mentioned before, is to take an online orientation courses as well as first year relationship and sexuality talk programs once they arrive on campus. So your student will receive an email about the online alcohol education courses, and it's important to complete that course before they come to Michigan, and there will be multiple reminders about that. The first year relationship and sexuality talk is a program that is in person, and they will be available throughout the fall semester. Students will receive an email about this program and be provided with all of the dates, times, and locations that these programs are offered, and your student can sign up for the program that works best for them. We will have workshop locations across campus to make this as convenient as possible. And we're also going to expand these workshop offerings for the winter semester for students who are really interested in learning even more than they did in the fall program. So again, your students will receive an email about the online course requirements that need to be completed before they come to Michigan, and your student will receive correspondence via email about the first year relationship and sexuality talk program, which is an in-person program that your student will be able to sign up for um, at, at a date and time and location that works best for them. Now, your students also have an amazing opportunity to get involved with so much at the University of Michigan. Student engagement is a critical part of college life, and students seek out small and large group events based on their interests. And there are so many different ways to get involved and student organizations to join, that it's likely your student will find not just one but many areas of interest to get involved. Sometimes students can be overwhelmed um, by how many organizations are available. And so we have resource navigators. Those are individuals who are available to assist students acclimate to campus and find community there. There are a lot of ways to engage, not just attending large events. And so we have not only on-campus resource fairs and information fairs, but it's really important to continue engaging in these Welcome to Michigan webinars so that you can learn even more about other ways for students to get involved based on their interests. Now, you know your students better than anyone. And for those of you who may be sending your first student to college, or maybe your second or third or beyond student to college, there are some topics that, if you're looking for them, we suggest you think about having with your student. Really thinking about their overall well-being is vital. Checking in with students. Are they getting the food that they're hoping to eat? Are they getting physical exercise? Are they making connection with other people? How is their sleep? These are all topics that are really important to explore, not just at the beginning of the school year, but really throughout their first year and beyond. Um, Again, we really know through research that connecting decisions to values is so important for the experience to be one that is memorable and successful. The first 6 weeks of the fall semester are truly vital to the entire college experience. And that is something to say again. The first 6 weeks are vital to your students' college experience, not just the first year, the entire experience. And data and research pans that out over and over again. And it is also really important that students connect with campus resources to bridge care or establish care. So if your student is working with a mental health provider or has an accommodation, it's really important to bridge that care before the school year starts so that everything is in place. Now, before we talk about bridging resources, really want to highlight again that the Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center, the Office of Student Conflict Resolution, the Dean of Students, and Wolverine Wellness are here. We offer a variety of services free for your students. And all of these offices, by the way, hire students as well to work for us. And so that is important, again, as we think about being connected to the campus. Okay, let's talk about bridging or establishing care. It is really important, as I mentioned, before the school year starts to make those connections if your student is currently receiving mental health care, thinking about physical health needs, thinking about relationships to alcohol and other drugs. If your student's in recovery, getting them connected to the collegiate recovery program, really important. And last but not least, if your student has an accommodation, and it's really important to have the documentation in place. Getting connected with the Student Accessibility and Accommodation Services Office before the school year starts will ensure a seamless transition. Um, really want to also just talk about that. Uh, we have an opportunity to share additional information about um, uh, these resources through other webinars. And so please take time to visit the Getting to Know Michigan website for these recorded webinars for other student life and campus partners, such as the Counseling and Psychological Services, University Health Service, Multi-Ethnic Student Fairs, and Michigan Housing. But again, just to emphasize the point, please bridge and establish that care as soon as you can. Whether you walk to the office, if you're local, email, call, if you're distant, or if you have any questions, again, the Dean of Students Office can help bridge those connections. But the seamless transition is more likely to happen if you make these connections, start the relationships before the school year begins. And these resources are available on your screen and again available on the University of Michigan's website. If you remember nothing else from our presentation, however, please remember the Dean of Students Office, because the Dean of Students Office can help make these connections with you. So as we wrap up our time together today in this webinar, I would just ask you to think about, what key conversations would you like to have with your student before they come to Michigan, conversations once they arrive, and then conversations you're going to have with your student throughout their first semester and beyond. Again, we know you know your students better than anyone, and we're here to help both your student and you navigate the University of Michigan so that they can have a successful first year and beyond. And last but not least, the Dean of Students Office information is available should you have any questions or if you're just not sure where to navigate. But thank you very much for joining me on this webinar. I hope you found this information helpful, and I wish you and your students a successful first year at the University of Michigan.